Every day, somewhere in the world, someone crosses a border to escape justice. And when they do, there's one organization that follows them wherever they run. Interpol. Short for the International Criminal Police Organization, Interpol links together the law enforcement agencies of 196 nations, from the FBI in the United States, to Europol in the EU, to the smallest police outposts in remote corners of Africa. Interpol doesn't make arrests. Its personnel don't carry guns or chase suspects through airports. Instead, the organization acts as a global nerve center, sharing intelligence, tracking movements, and issuing alerts that can make a fugitive visible in places they thought they had disappeared. To do that, Interpol uses a color-coded notice system, a kind of international language of pursuit. A blue notice tracks someone's movements and is used when a suspect's location is unknown. A yellow notice helps find missing persons, particularly children. A black notice identifies bodies found far from home. A green notice warns other nations about criminals who may offend again. A silver notice helps trace and seize their assets. An orange notice alerts authorities to potential threats. A purple notice details specific criminal methods. But at the very top of that hierarchy sits the red notice, the most urgent and serious of them all. A red notice is essentially a global wanted poster, a signal to almost every police force on Earth to locate, arrest, and extradite the accused back to the member countries searching for them. There are currently over 6,500 red notices in circulation, featuring all manner of fugitives, from family annihilators to deranged gurus, fish-lipped drug traffickers to smiling human traffickers. And in this video, we'll be examining a handful of them. If looking at these most wanted lists has taught me anything, it's that law enforcement has access to so much data to track these criminals down. Check out this report, for instance. It contains email and postal addresses, social media profiles, relatives, dating profiles. It's almost 11 pages of sensitive information. Except, this isn't a report pulled from an investigation. It's a report on a random non-criminal anyone can buy from a data broker site. I didn't need a warrant to access this sensitive info. I just needed an account. Data brokers make billions collecting your personal data, packaging it like this, and selling it to whoever wants it. They were definitely selling a report on me, and are probably selling one on you right now. Why should anyone have access to so much of your information? They shouldn't. That's why I use Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura protects your privacy by identifying data brokers selling your info. They take care of the hard part, automatically removing your info from these sites and keeping it off. A lot of services offer this, but none of them offer as many features as Aura for the same price. Try Aura free for 14 days at aura.com/lazy. In those 2 weeks, Aura will get to work scrubbing your personal info off these data broker sites. This is one of the most wanted men in the Western Hemisphere. An MS-13 leader so powerful that he's turned parts of Honduras into his own private corporation. His name is Yulan Archaga Carias, but on the streets and in the prison yards of Central America, he's simply El PORKY, a deceptively playful nickname for one of Interpol's most dangerous fugitives. To understand who Yulan, or PORKY, is, we first have to understand what Mara Salvatrucha, MS-13, has become. What started as a street gang in Los Angeles in the 1980s has since grown into one of the world's most notorious criminal organizations, with tens of thousands of members across the Americas. In Central America especially, MS-13 has evolved into something more than a gang. Some describe it as a parallel state, one that collects taxes, controls neighborhoods, sells narcotics and weapons on an industrial scale, and enforces its own brand of justice on those who oppose them. In a poor nation with few opportunities, such groups represent a way out of poverty, a brotherhood that can give their lives structure, value, and meaning. And that's exactly how Yulan was introduced to them. According to Yulan himself, he spent his childhood in the 1990s roaming the streets of San Pedro Sula. By day, he stole watches, and by night, he huffed paint thinner, convinced he'd die in the gutter before reaching adulthood. One evening, a sudden downpour drove him to take shelter in an abandoned building, where a chance encounter changed everything. Inside was a young MS-13 member who called himself Indio. He'd been deported from the United States a few years earlier and was trying to rebuild his life in Honduras. From then, Indio took Yulan under his wing and gave him a new name: PORKY. Their past selves didn't matter, he told him, and such nicknames allowed them to be reborn in a sense. This older boy not only became Porky's mentor, but a father figure of sorts, and helped him escape a life on the streets. Little more than a low-level gang soldier himself, Indio earned most of his money working at a gun store, where he taught Porky how to repair firearms of every kind. During those long nights at the shop, he explained MS-13's blood feud with their rivals, a group called Barrio 18, and a war between the two factions would soon consume them both. In 1997, while up a ladder fixing a light bulb, Indio was gunned down by Barrio 18 headhunters. It was the first time Porky lost one of his own. Swearing vengeance, he formally joined the ranks of MS-13 and began his transformation from street rat to kingpin. Old Porky wasn't your typical tattoo-covered enforcer though. He was soft-spoken and strategic, a young man who saw MS-13 not as a gang, but as a business, and that mindset helped him become a regional leader. Porky understood that power wasn't only earned through violence, it was sustained through structure, and as such, he didn't just hire muscle. He financed the careers of law students and recruited accountants and administrators to help protect and expand the group's piece of the pie. He promoted members based solely on merit, ensuring that the best and brightest worked directly under him. He didn't over-extort locals and cut down on random acts of violence to gain their loyalty. That's not to say he wasn't willing to order hits at a moment's notice though. He did so frequently, but intentionally, targeting both members of MS-13 that he suspected of disloyalty and anyone working for a rival faction, especially Barrio 18 grunts. According to informers, Porky would routinely have 18ers, as he called them, captured and then tied to trees for machete and firearms training. Other times, he released them into the wild to be hunted like deer. All the while, he'd relax in a hammock, listening to their screams while raising a toast to Indio. Porky's intelligence and capacity for violence helped him rise to the top. Before long, he was the highest-ranking member of Mara Salvatrucha in the country. Under his leadership, the Honduran branch of MS-13 became a tightly controlled enterprise, coordinating directly with Colombian producers and Mexican cartels to move narcotics north towards the US, and providing them with elite Sicario kill squads. According to US indictments, Porky personally supervised multi-ton shipments of illegal substances into the States each year, then laundered profits to fill MS-13's piggy bank. That money bought guns, safe houses and loyalty, and paid for the kind of political protection that makes men like him almost untouchable. On Christmas Day, 2015, El Porky was arrested for his association with criminal organizations. He was sentenced to 20 years. But prison didn't slow Porky down. With the assistance of corrupt guards, he turned his prison into an operations hub and his cell into a boardroom, one from which he issued orders across Honduras using smuggled phones. In February 2020, Porky was taken to a courthouse hearing in El Progreso, accused of assassinating 2 Honduran prosecutors. He was escorted by van, not by helicopter, as was protocol, a sure sign that something was amiss. As the hearing was brought into session, a commando unit of more than 20 MS-13 members, disguised in authentic military-style uniforms, stormed the building. Security footage showed 2 synchronized entries. One team paraded a handcuffed decoy to make themselves appear official and cause a distraction, while a second team walked in a figure under a black hooded tunic, the kind used to hide a witness's identity, but which in this case was used to smuggle in weapons and ammo. Once inside the courtroom, the commandos unleashed hell, firing off rounds and extracting Porky through the main doors and into an escape van. A second firefight erupted at the exit. The jailbreak left 5 people dead, 4 officers and 1 MS-13 member. Numerous bystanders were wounded, but Porky escaped unharmed. Later, witnesses reported that real police officers had even helped coordinate traffic stops to clear his escape route, exposing just how far the crime lord's influence stretched. Frustratingly, Honduras is a country where the line between police and perpetrator can be wafer thin. Following the breakout, 2 Interpol red notices were issued by both Honduras and the United States, listing PORKY under his other alias, Alexander Mendoza. The FBI also added him to its 10 most wanted list, labeling him one of the most violent and elusive figures in the Western Hemisphere, and placing a $5 million bounty on his head. But recapturing PORKY has proven to be nearly impossible, and that may be because he has powerful friends. Some have accused the Honduran government of helping PORKY evade justice, repayment for murdering his former cellmate, Neri Lopez, who was about to testify against President Hernandez. As would later come to light, the president's own brother was involved in the narcotics trade, and he had, allegedly, been using his influence to protect the operation. Neri Lopez, allegedly, had evidence of this. That remains unconfirmed, but it would explain the strange circumstances surrounding PORKY's breakout. Though PORKY is thought to still be in Honduras, he's almost certainly being protected by those loyal to, or fearful of, his authority. But perhaps more than anything, it's MS-13's infrastructure that's allowed PORKY to remain so hidden. The group operates through cliques, semi-autonomous cells that continue operating, even if the leader vanishes. So even if PORKY may be hiding off-grid, he hasn't lost control. Today, Honduras' homicide rate remains among the highest in the world. Entire neighborhoods are under gang curfew. Children are recruited as lookouts. Bus drivers pay war taxes just to keep working. It's a society being held hostage by the networks El PORKY helped expand, and it seems he has no intention of loosening his grip. Known as Das Phantom, Norman Volker Franz is one of Europe's most elusive fugitives. A convicted murderer who escaped prison not just once, but twice, and vanished without a trace. For over 2 decades, he's managed to stay ahead of law enforcement, despite being the subject of an Interpol red notice. His story reads like a thriller, but the victims he left behind, and the danger he still poses, are all too real. Born in 1970 in West Germany, Norman lived a pretty mundane life up until the age of 25. He'd trained to be an electrician, and though he was technically competent, colleagues described him as a restless young man who found the work dull and the money underwhelming. He dreamt of excitement, of status and wealth, and so, in 1995, he abandoned his professional career and, as one does, joined a criminal gang, one involved in counterfeiting and armed robberies. But frankly, he couldn't have signed up at a more dangerous time. A Polish bootlegger called Pawlowski had just gotten into a financial dispute with the group, and allegedly had threatened one of their wives. Along with fellow gang members Christian K., Thomas D., and Andreas Prince, Norman was enlisted to settle the score. In May of that same year, the group lured Pawlowski to a remote road near Dortmund's Zuburg district. One of the members, Andreas Prince, stopped the Polish man's vehicle and approached, pretending he needed to speak with him. Inside the car was Pawlowski and 2 other men. They may have been innocent, but Prince didn't care. As the window came down, he casually tossed a live hand grenade into their car. Before the 3 targets knew what had just happened, the device exploded and set the vehicle alight. Pawlowski was unable to get out of the car and was consumed by the flames. One of the passengers, whose legs had been shredded, managed to crawl from the vehicle, but the ambushers callously executed him with a pump-action shotgun blast to the head. The 3rd occupant managed to escape the immediate scene, but was pursued by Norman and his accomplices in a BMW. They drove up beside him and opened fire. But despite the grenade shrapnel and shotgun blast that he had sustained, this 3rd target managed to escape into a forest. His testimony would help police piece together the massacre and link it back to Norman's gang. Feeling the heat, Norman altered his appearance and fled with his girlfriend Sandra across several European countries, before finally being apprehended at a toll station in France. He was extradited back to Germany, and despite claiming that he hadn't fired his weapon, was sentenced to life in prison for Doppelmord, or double murder. That same year, while behind bars at Hagen prison, he married Sandra, and, in very Bonnie and Clyde fashion, they quietly planned his escape. On March 11th, 1997, Sandra paid a conjugal visit to the prison. Having been mistreated by near most everyone, from her parents to other men while growing up, Norman had been one of the few people to treat her with kindness and respect, and for that, she was completely loyal to him. Besides, she knew that he wasn't actually one of the triggermen, that he was innocent of any wrongdoing in the Polish incident. He'd been sure to convince her of that. And so, risking her own freedom, she taped diamond wire saw blades to the inside of her belt and covertly passed them to Norman during the visitation. According to one source, that night, Norman soared through the bars on his window, climbed onto the roof using a ladder fashioned from broomsticks and bucket handles, and slid down the gutter. A fan of theatrics, he even left the stereo in his cell running, with the song "Time to Say Goodbye" playing on a continuous loop. As expected, Sandra was waiting for him in her red VW Polo, with 1,500 marks, food, clothes, 2 fake passports, and a pistol with 2 loaded 9mm Luger magazines. For 2 weeks, the lovebirds sustained themselves by shoplifting groceries, but knew that if they were to start a new life abroad, they'd need to get their hands on some serious money. And so, on March 26, 1997, Norman ambushed Rudolf Tam, a security guard delivering cash to a bank in Weimar. Norman shot Rudolf, grabbed the cash box, and escaped on foot. All the while, Sandra was acting as a lookout. She hadn't expected Norman to kill the guard, but he said that the man tried to grab the weapon from his hand, and it just went off. Again, she believed him. The box contained less cash than they thought, around 15,000 Deutschmarks, or a little over $8,000 at the time. So, on July 21st, Norman struck again. This time, he promised his wife no blood would be spilled. But he lied. That afternoon, Norman ambushed 2 couriers, Gerd Koch and Peter Seidel, as they were about to load nearly 500,000 Deutschmarks into an armoured vehicle in Payson. Without warning, he fired shots into the back of their heads. Hearing the blasts, Sandra ran over and found Norman standing over their bodies with a crazed look on his face, a distorted expression she had never seen him make before. They grabbed a money chest each and made for their vehicle, but their relationship was never the same after that. On October 24th, 1998, German investigators tracked the couple down in Albufeira, Portugal, where they were living with their newborn son. Norman had failed to stop at a police checkpoint, and officials scanned his license plate. The car had been bought under a fake name and was linked back to the couple. Norman didn't think that the Portuguese would extradite them, but when officers approached the couple as they were exiting a supermarket, he knew that the jig was up. The pair surrendered without resistance. They were both placed in custody while awaiting extradition. In the meantime, he and Sandra exchanged letters. In one, he wrote, "Sandra, I love you so much, and what I would give to have spared you all of this. I hope you don't regret the time you spent with me. You have reason enough. I wouldn't trade this life for any other, even if others wouldn't understand. I have your love, and my love for you has been heard. What more could I want?" On July 28th, 1999, Norman Franz broke out of Lisbon's central prison. Much like before, he cut through the bars of his cell window and used knotted bedsheets to rappel down the outer wall. How he acquired another saw remains unclear, but by the time guards realized what had happened, the Phantom was long gone. Since that night, he's lived up to his nickname and hasn't been seen or heard from. In his final letter to Sandra, he had written, "I'll definitely send you the picture of the wolf beforehand. I know it will cheer you up. Then you'll have something to look at." It was a code which they had discussed. If Sandra received a wolf picture in the mail, it meant that the coast was clear, that Norman was going to break her out, that he hadn't forgotten her. Sandra was returned to Germany and sentenced to 6 years and 3 months. She never received a picture of a wolf. In fact, neither she nor her son heard from Norman again. She's since divorced him. As of 2025, Norman Volker Franz remains one of Interpol's most wanted fugitives. Authorities believe he may be relying on false passports and working in under-the-radar industries such as construction or hospitality, where background checks are rare and cash payments are common. He speaks fluent German and Portuguese, and likely has resources and contacts that allow him to stay mobile and hidden. It's also believed that he has cut all ties with family and past associates to avoid detection. Over the years, there have been scattered reports suggesting he may be hiding in Portugal, on Caribbean islands, in South America, or even in Africa, though none of them have been verified. As well as these images of Norman, this sample from a phone call recording has also been released.
Ich habe gerade mit ihm gesprochen, ne? Also der ist super, auf jeden Fall. Und Ende der Woche, werde ich vom Gefängnis für eine halbe Stunde ins Gericht überführt.
Anyone with information is urged to submit a tip to Interpol. Rewards totaling around €100,000 are on offer for any information leading to Norman's arrest. Antonio Anglés Martins, known to friends as Sugar, is often described as Spain's most wanted man, and has an extremely disturbing Interpol profile to back that claim up. He sought for his part in the Alcácer girls incident, one of the nation's most infamous and contentious cases. Born on the 27th of July, 1966, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Antonio and his family relocated to Valencia when he was just 2 years old. From adolescence, he began exhibiting violent behavior, particularly towards women, and habitually beat his own mother, on one occasion knocking out some of her teeth. In January 1990, Antonio was imprisoned for kidnapping and beating 20-year-old Núria Pera Mateu, accusing her of stealing his heroin. He had chained her up inside a house in Catarroja, kept her there for 2 days, and likely would have killed her by throwing her in a well, if not for the intervention of his brother, who stepped in just in time to save her life. For that, Antonio was sentenced to 6 years and 4 months, but prison authorities decided to give him a chance at rehabilitation. And so, on March 5th, 1992, he was granted a 6-day furlough, a temporary release meant to help inmates reintegrate into society. But Antonio had no intention of returning. He vanished during that leave, and a warrant for his arrest wasn't put out for 6 months. But failing to return to prison isn't the reason for Antonio's red notice. His worst crime was yet to come. It was the night of Friday, November 13th, 1992, and 3 friends, Miriam Garcia, Desiree Hernandez, and Toñi Gomez, were getting ready for what should have been an ordinary evening out. The trio, all from the quiet and safe town of Alcácer, were planning to attend a high school party at Color, a popular disco on the outskirts of Picasen, another town just 4 kilometers away. A 4th friend, Esther, was meant to join them, but was forced to stay home due to sickness. At 8 p.m, Miriam asked her father to give them a lift to Color, but he too was bedridden with the flu. So, like they'd done many times before, the teens decided to hitchhike. An acquaintance happened to spot them and gave them a ride to a petrol station near Picasen. From there, witnesses recalled seeing the trio climb into the back of another vehicle, this time a white sedan occupied by at least 2 males, though maybe it was 3, maybe 4. Their accounts were shaky. What is certain is that Miriam, Toñi, and Desiree didn't make it home that night. After stepping into that white car, they were never seen alive again. The Alcácer girls were reported missing the following day, though the official search for them didn't begin until a few days later, and wasn't without incident. While scouring the ravines of Picasen, 2 civil protection volunteers were run over by an all-terrain vehicle, killing one of them instantly, and setting back the investigation. Hoping that the girls were still alive, the authorities considered whether they had run away or had been trafficked to northern Africa. The search stretched on for 2.5 long months, until, on January 27th, 1993, the grim truth surfaced. Heavy rain had softened the soil of La Romana, a difficult-to-access ravine near the Tos Reservoir, 25 kilometers from where the young women were last seen alive. 2 beekeepers were tending to their hives when they noticed a patch of disturbed ground with a shiny object sticking out of it. It was a Mickey Mouse watch, and as one of them knelt down to examine it, he realized it was still attached to a human arm. Law enforcement and news reporters descended on the scene. After digging up the area, they discovered a grave containing the bodies of the Alcacer trio, wrapped in carpet, one on top of the other. They had been tied up and mutilated, and a cross was found lodged inside one of their bodies. The public was furious, and their outrage only grew when primetime networks aired close-ups of the remains on TV. Additionally, early police missteps, the mishandling and losing of evidence, a botched autopsy, and general institutional incompetence allowed speculation to thrive. The media latched onto that, with some claiming a group of wealthy and powerful elites committed the atrocity, either as part of a satanic ritual or a snuff movie film shoot. Many Spaniards still believe that. However, prosecutors allege that the men responsible were Miguel Ricard, aka the Blonde, a volatile addict who did indeed own a white Opel Corsa, and his close associate, Antonio Sugar Anglés. During the forensic sweep that followed, investigators recovered a large array of objects in and around the ditch, including a 9mm shell casing, a glove belonging to Miguel Ricard, and a torn-up medical slip bearing the name Enrique Anglés, Antonio's intellectually disabled brother. Antonio often assumed his brother's identity, and at one point aimed a gun at his head, telling him that he would pull the trigger if he ever snitched. Given his past convictions, the authorities knew which Anglés brother they were actually searching for. The civil guard went to the Anglés family home to investigate, and as luck would have it, Miguel Ricard just so happened to be there too. He was arrested on the spot, but Antonio managed to escape through a bedroom window, taking with him several fake IDs. For nearly a month, Antonio moved between villages across Valencia, sleeping rough in fields and abandoned buildings. Eventually, he resurfaced in Minglania, where he hijacked a car at gunpoint. That was the last confirmed sighting of him in Spain. As Miguel would later testify, on that fateful Friday the 13th, he and Antonio picked up Miriam, Desi, and Toñi and offered them a ride to Culor. After driving by the venue, Antonio pulled out a handgun. When the 3 victims became agitated, he struck them with the butt of the weapon, bound their wrists, and ordered Miguel to head for a hut in Catadao, one of Antonio's hideouts. Throughout the night, Antonio forced himself upon the victims, toyed with them, and tormented them in unimaginable ways. He allegedly forced Miguel to join in, or else he would, quote, send him to hell. Later, the men went into town to buy food and drinks, leaving the victims restrained. They returned and slept in the hut. The next afternoon, Antonio forced the girls into a pre-dug pit and gunned them down. According to Miguel, he was an unwilling participant and had been brought along as a scapegoat. By March 1993, Antonio had made it to Lisbon, where witnesses identified him by his distinctive tattoos. One of a Chinese woman with a parasol, another of the Reaper holding a scythe, and ironically, simply the phrase, mother's love. A collaborator of his later said that Antonio stole his passport and was planning to flee to Brazil. From Lisbon's main port, it's believed that he boarded the ship City of Plymouth as a stowaway. Crew members discovered a man identical to Antonio hiding aboard and kept him in a room under lock and key. However, when the ship docked in Dublin, they found that the room was empty. The man had seemingly escaped into the freezing Atlantic Ocean through the porthole. A lifebelt was discovered floating in Dublin's harbour. Though some think this man drowned or succumbed to hypothermia, his body never washed ashore, and a former port worker claimed that he had seen a man slip off the City of Plymouth and vanish into the darkness mere moments before Irish authorities boarded the vessel to question him. If this was Antonio, he may have snuck onto another ship, perhaps one bound for South America. Since then, law enforcement have conducted searches in Uruguay, Mexico, Argentina, the Dominican Republic, and his birth country, Brazil, but Antonio Anglés has yet to be found. Thing is, not everyone believes the official narrative. Many still say that this whole case was a cover-up, that Antonio was selected as the fall guy, and that he was permanently silenced to protect an international cabal of VIPs. According to reports, 15 hairs were found on the bodies of Miriam, Desiree, and Tonyi, and of the 12 that were actually tested, none of them matched with Antonio or Miguel. That being said, it is possible that they came from unprofessional investigators, coroners, or anyone else who looked over the remains. Though Spanish forums remain awash with speculation, I think much of it has been fanned by years of sensationalist reporting, and personally, I don't subscribe to any of the alternative theories. Neither does Interpol. The organization still lists the prime suspect, Antonio Anglés Martins, as alive. A Millionaria Recompensa, or €1,000,000 level reward, is being offered by Spanish authorities for information leading to his arrest. But the clock is ticking. In Spain, even major crimes can become legally unprosecutable after a fixed period. Judicial sources have reported that criminal responsibility for the Alcácer case will expire in December 2029. But what of the suspect that was caught, Miguel Ricard? Well, he would later claim that 2 other men were involved in the murders. One of them was Antonio's brother, 16-year-old Mauricio Anglés, and the other was a man referred to only as El Nano. Strands of Mauricio's hair was allegedly found at the crime scene, as was DNA belonging to another brother, Roberto Anglés, but it was never proven that either of them were there on the night of the incident. Later, Miguel changed his testimony, saying he only confessed to his role in the crime after being tortured by interrogators. A medical examination of his body showed no injuries. In September 1997, following a 3-month trial, Miguel Ricard was convicted for his part in the murders and sentenced to 170 years in prison. He was released after 20 and was last seen in Madrid, trying to buy illicit substances. Heloísa Borba Gonçalves is a Brazilian serial killer accused of marrying, deceiving, and slaying a string of wealthy men for financial gain. Because of her modus operandi, she's commonly referred to by her nickname, a Viúva Negra, the Black Widow. Because she's maintained multiple identities throughout her life, large parts of Heloísa's background are difficult to verify. What is clear is that she was born in Porto Alegre on March 13th, 1950. Growing up, friends described her as intelligent and charismatic, albeit manipulative, and though she didn't conform to Brazil's conventional beauty standards, most agreed that she radiated a certain innocence that men found magnetic. Men like Heloísa's first partner, Carlos Pinto da Silva, with whom she had her first child, Patricia, at the age of 19. But as Heloísa came to realize, playing happy families wasn't her bag. At the age of 21, she left Carlos behind and moved on to someone new, a reserved German physician named Dr. Günther Wolf, a man 17 years her senior. Their relationship moved quickly, and before long, Heloísa was pregnant again. On December 27, 1971, the couple set out for Taquara in Dr. Wolf's Volkswagen. Somewhere along the route, their car collided with a truck. Wolf was killed instantly. Heloísa walked away unharmed. Months later, she gave birth to a daughter, Vittoria, and as the mother of Dr. Wolf's child, inherited his property in Porto Alegre. It's unknown what exactly caused the crash. Speeding, a lapse in concentration, a sharp grab of the wheel. But whether it was a tragic accident or not, that inheritance seems to have taught Heloísa a morbid lesson. That a dead lover could be worth more than a living one. After that, Heloísa returned to Carlos and became pregnant yet again. This time, she had a son, Carlos Jr. In December 1977, The family took a Christmas holiday to Salvador and stayed at the hotel on Gina. Terrifyingly, as they exited the hotel on the 27th, they were ambushed by robbers, and Carlos was shot 5 times in the chest. He barely escaped with his life, and while speaking with officers, accused Heloísa of orchestrating the attack. However, he quickly withdrew his statement for reasons unknown. Having gone through law school, Heloísa knew how to play the legal system and convinced detectives to drop their investigation. After splitting from Carlos, Heloísa bounced between Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Goiás, and Brasilia, committing fraud in every city. She issued bad checks to airlines and withdrew social security benefits using stolen identities. This came back to bite her in the early 1980s, when she was arrested for signing documents under a false name. Realizing that her scheme had failed, she devised a new plan: the Heloísa system. Step 1. Hatch. Heloísa would go through a metamorphosis of sorts, dropping the innocent doe-eyed act and reinventing herself as whoever she needed to be: a cultured bachelorette, a sympathetic widow, an alluring temptress. Step 2. Entice. In hotel bars, upscale lounges, and even Catholic churches, she would cavort with affluent older gentlemen and introduce herself as her character. Step 3. Legally bind. Heloísa would romance and eventually marry her prey. Step 4. Oversee paperwork. She would then set up shared bank accounts and life insurance policies, manage property transfers, and have wills written up in her favour. Step 5. Incident. Inevitably, something terrible would happen to her new, darling hubby. Step 6. Spend. Heloísa would use their fortune to dry her tears. And then finally came Step 7. Do it all over again. First to the plate was Irineo Duque Suarez, an insurance broker from Ipanema with whom she had another child, Daniel. The couple married on May 13th, 1983, but their union was short-lived. While driving through Rio, their car was flagged down by another vehicle. Irineo stepped out of his car and, after asking what was up, was shot twice in the chest. Heloísa inherited 3 apartments in the south of Rio, a car, and a substantial amount of cash. She used it to purchase designer clothes and hats. In the late 1980s, Heloísa bigamously married 2 men at the same time: military policeman Roberto de Souza Lopez and successful business owner Colonel Jorge Ribeiro. Using her old and new IDs, she managed to wed both men under different names and maintained both marriages by convincing Colonel Ribeiro that they should live separately in a modern arrangement. While juggling 2 husbands, Heloísa also began dating Syrian millionaire Nicolau Sard. Amid these relationships, she became pregnant with a 5th child, Marcelo. Each man assumed that he was the father. Later that year, on May 8th, Heloísa married Nicolau, and in November, divorced Roberto, ending one of her 3 overlapping marriages. On December 29th, 1991, Nicolau Sard was found dead at his home. The official cause was recorded as heart failure, but coroners noted that he had a broken arm, which in his family's mind indicated that he had been forced to drink something. According to Nicolau's nephew, the police showed little interest in investigating the incident further, and Heloísa received a hefty inheritance of $5.5 million, as well as several properties which generated significant rental income. Around that same time, Heloísa's relationship with the colonel started to sour. Fearful that he may divorce her, she decided to take the initiative. In early 1992, she hired a hitman to break into her husband's office in Copacabana. The assailant bound and gagged the colonel with a plastic bag and nylon cords, and then struck him repeatedly in the face and head with a sledgehammer. The blows fractured his skull, killing him almost instantly. Heloísa was not only present at the scene, but aided in the execution. She was questioned only once by detectives. Months later, a new victim became entangled in Heloísa's web: an elderly Lebanese businessman named Wagi Murad, whom she married in late 1992. Months later, while stopped at a red light in Recreeros dos Banderanches, Wagi and his friend, Wagner Leno, were shot dead in their car. Despite having been married for less than a year, Heloísa inherited the bulk of Wagi's estate. By that point, the unlucky widow had amassed tens of millions of reais. Authorities failed to connect the glaringly obvious dots, but someone else had. Behind the scenes, Wagi's son, Eli Murad, had begun his own investigation. Suspicious of his stepmother, he hired private eyes to dig into her past, and what they found was staggering. A trail of dead husbands and boyfriends, stretching back years. Eli became convinced that Heloísa had orchestrated his father's murder as well. In October 1993, Eli set out for the police station to hand over his evidence. On the way, 2 gunmen ambushed his car. Eli watched as his bodyguard, Luis Marquez, was gunned down beside him. Before Eli could unbuckle his belt, a bullet tore through the back of his head, and his world went dark. But miraculously, Eli survived. After 2 weeks in intensive care, he took his findings to the police, accusing Heloísa of not only attempting to take his life, but of successfully eliminating Luis Marquez, Wagi Murad, Wagner Leno, Colonel Ribeiro, Nicolau Saad, and Ireneo Duque Suarez. Though she used her considerable net worth to fight the charges and push back the proceedings, Heloísa was forced into hiding circa 2010. After missing hearings, she was tried in absentia under Brazil's empty chair law in 2011 and was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison for fraud and bigamy, and a further 18 years for double qualified homicide. Officers scoured Rio for her, and a reward of 11,000 reais was advertised for tips. But it was too late. Heloísa had already fled the country. Unsurprisingly, given the police's incompetence, it fell on Eli to track her down. He managed to uncover a paper trail that led to California, New York, and Virginia in the USA. This information was passed on to the federal police, who in turn forwarded it to Interpol. A red notice was swiftly issued. As it stands, the Black Widow is currently believed to be residing in Florida, where she signed documents as Heloísa Saad Lopez, combining the surnames of one of her former partners and a more recent American husband. At least 2 of her children, Patricia and Carlos Jr., are also living in the Sunshine State with her. One helps foreigners become US citizens, while the other is a pilot with his own air transport company. Both Patricia and Carlos Jr. have since faced charges of document fraud after Heloísa tried to put her deceased husband's properties in their names. According to Interpol, 75-year-old Heloísa has managed to remain on the run due to the use of 8 false names, in addition to having considerable financial capacity and relatives living abroad. If she does have naturalized American status, that won't help either. The US rarely hands over their own nationals, even when treaties allow for it, so if she's found, getting her back to Brazil could be an uphill battle. Do you live in Florida? Have you seen this face? If so, Interpol would like to hear from you. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, there are plenty of other red notices to cover. Let me know whether you'd like to see a part 2 down in the comments. Before the video ends, I'd like to give a huge shout out to my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters: Holly Lyons, Gina Valera, Colin Monsma, Connor Louthan, Hamish, Alana Pons, Azrael Warakai, Peter Lulgjuraj, TNS Mum, Asia Mina, George Lopez, Farewelltattoosjaxfl, Yokai, Mistyblue Longie, Aðalsteinn Traustason, John Stewart Muller, Tom Folds, Redacted Pluto, and Hamish K. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. Until next time guys, have a happy Halloween, and I'll see you all again very soon.